In this multidimensional world, much of which is invisible to the eye, a group of non-physical entities have come here to expand our knowledge of how the universe works. These non-physical teachers are called Joshua, and they convey their teaching through Gary Temple Bodley. Each week, Gary, with a selection of law of attraction experts, open up a roundtable of thought-provoking discussions surrounding the teachings of Joshua. Joshua's intention is to bring clarity to the listeners through the ever-expanding law of attraction by looking at reality from a new perspective. Welcome to the teachings of Joshua Roundtable.
Hello everyone, this is episode 12 of the Teachings of Joshua Roundtable. I'm your host, Gary Temple Bodley. This week, we'll continue our discussion about children. If you remember from last week, we talked about some ideas related to raising empowered children. Today we'll talk about education and intelligence. Are children born with varying degrees of intelligence? Does our current system of education make sense given what we know about the laws of the universe? Today we will find out what Joshua has to say on the topic. As always, we will discuss Joshua's quote of the week, and today's question comes from Elena, who asked about her grandson who has Asperger syndrome. On the roundtable today, we have Steve Finizza. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Gary.
And Michael Cudson. Hi, Michael.
How are you doing, Gary?
Great. Did you guys have a great Christmas? And, anyway, that weekend and all that stuff? Did you get through it?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. We celebrated a traditional Jewish Christmas.
And how's that?
Chinese food in a movie.
Sounds like fun.
Does sound like fun. Sounds like more fun than I had, actually. But everything worked out well at the end. All righty. Well, Janine is not with us today. She's actually missing in action. So we'll find out what happened to her and get back with you. Or she may even show up right in the middle of our roundtable discussion. So normally what we do is we have Janine read the quote of the week. Since she's not here, we're going to have to do this on our own, guerrilla style. Do you guys have the quote of the week?
Yes.
Okay, Steve, do you want to read that?
Sure thing.
Awesome.
At this moment in time, you have the ability through your access to infinite intelligence to do anything you truly desire.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So we all have access to infinite intelligence. But it doesn't seem like that, does it? It seems like some people just seem to be smarter than other ones. And I think what Joshua was saying here is we all have access to it, but how do we access it? Do you guys understand how that works?
I know that it's thoughts exist, and you don't, like when you come up with an idea in your head, it's not like you created it, you attracted that thought.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah, so that was a mind shift.
I know, and really, when we talk about education today, we're really going to talk about how this mind shift really is, that you don't manufacture thoughts in your head like a factory, that you attract thoughts based on your vibration. And the thoughts you attract really have a lot to do with your interests and your desire. The combination of interest and desire produces the vibration that gets you into that realm of the idea that you aren't a match to yet, but the desire and the fascination or the interest in something that you're doing raises your vibration to a point that you now have access to the idea that was there all along. And this is why you see that inventions sometimes are created at the same time. Like I think the airplane, there was, or the hot air balloon. These things were created on different sides of the world at just about the same time. Brand new ideas that came together at the same time with people not really knowing about what the other person's doing. So they both came to the resonance with that idea at the same time and got access to it.
It's almost like an idea it's like a time has come for this idea to resonate with the world. And so those people that are on the very leading edge, who are passionate about that idea, are the first ones that like tune into it. So.
Yeah, and you can see this with a lot of companies that start, is that an idea will come, but the idea is often ahead of its time. So while the founder of the company and the people working on that idea are in vibrational resonance with it, the customers aren't.
Yeah, I read.
Go Go ahead.
I read that the guy who invented the TV died penniless, made no money off of it at all,
Right.
because nobody.
Was that Marconi, or was that the different guy?
Oh, I don't.
Marconi was the radio guy.
Radio, that's right.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, because when you invent the TV, there's no broadcasters, there's no, it's that whole chicken and egg thing, right? Nobody wants to broadcast if nobody has a TV. Yeah, so.
And when I was reading a story about the guy who invented the cell phone, and they're like, why would anyone want to carry around a phone in their pocket when they have a phone at home? And it took years before anyone could even think that idea. I mean, I think the cell phone was invented in the 70s.
I believe that.
Yeah, or even earlier.
I had to have a whole, it's funny. My wife and I were just married. We were walking around on the west side in New York City, and I was trying to persuade her to get a cell phone, and she said, "What are we ever going to use it for?"
Right.
And this was when the cell phones were significantly bigger, and she said, "We'll never ever use it." Now she lives on it.
Right. You don't even have a home phone now. It's strange to have a home phone.
Right.
Well, we're always a little behind technologically, so we still have landlines. But yeah, I remember I was blown away about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago when one of the young attorneys in my office, I needed her phone number because I was going to need to speak to her at night about something, and she gave me a 917 number, which is a cell phone number, and I said, "Okay, and what's your landline in case I can't get a hold of you?"
Right.
And she said, "I don't have one."
Yeah.
And I remember my jaw dropped. I said, "You don't have a landline?" And she said, "No, most of my friends don't have landlines. We don't need it. We live on our cell phones." And that was an eye opener for me.
Right. So there you see that things come, and older generations sort of have difficulty letting go of things that are no longer useful, and latching on to the newer, modern, higher vibrational technologies. And there's a case point right there. So speaking about this further, that knowing from the basis that you don't create ideas, that you attract ideas, that you can come into vibrational alignment with anything you want. So from this quote, anything is possible because you can come into resonance with any idea, even ideas that don't exist, as long as you have this desire. And anyone can do it. But also, you don't have to do it either.
That was a shift for me, because there's certain things that I didn't even want to pursue, because I just figured I wasn't good at that stuff.
Right.
So I was like, wow, that's not me. And now it's well, it could be me if I wanted to, right?
If you were interested.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why interest and desire are keys to, the new education system. In this, we're reading from now chapter 12 of Radical Change, all about children. It's actually a radical change in your approach to children. Another interesting thing from this chapter is that children are born at a higher vibrational stance that we are, because, when we were born, in our case, in the 60s, we were vibrationally matched to the earth at that time. The earth has raised its vibration, and so have we, but we have resistance and the earth has no resistance. So the earth's vibration is raised higher. So all those children coming in now, or, in the last 10, 20, obviously as it goes along, are born at a higher rate than we are. But the strange thing is, the way that the society is set up, we believe that we know more than they do. And this is like an issue of our whole society. So everything that happens from the time they're born is we believe that we have to teach them and guide them through, not really realizing that they've come more equipped than we are actually. And I think in this chapter, Joshua talks about the difference between the generation gap is really a vibrational gap.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. And I'll tell you, it's funny. About a half hour before we got on the phone, my wife and I were talking about colleges for my daughter. And my daughter, and I love my wife, and my wife is both very smart and very caring about my children, our children. But I said to my wife, I said, in many ways, our daughter has a better sense and is smarter, at least about what she needs, than either you or I.
Right.
And I wasn't getting into any discussion about Joshua or the law of attraction, but I said,
Yeah.
look, my wife keeps on saying it kills me she's not applying to this school, and it kills, and we've got to get her into blah, she should be, shooting for this or that or whatever. And I said, no, honey, she should be shooting for what's appropriate and and what's good for her. And that may not be the same as what would be good for us or appropriate for us. And in fact, I give my hats off to my daughter, because she is not getting herself caught up in all of the nonsense that some of the other kids and parents in the very competitive community that I live in get involved in, whether school X is one notch or two notches higher than school Y. And instead, she's looking for where she belongs, including taking into account what would be, the programs, what money she's being offered, everything. She's looking for what's good for her and no one else. And no one else. And I said, my God, that's maturity at such a degree, honey.
Right.
You've got to appreciate what a wonderful and brilliant and self-aware child we've raised.
And how did your wife take that?
She smiled and she acknowledged. And then, like 5 minutes later, started going back. But still,
Yeah. Well, that's because we are caught up in this influence of what is perceived right by society, which is probably fear-based, though. I mean,
Totally.
what does your daughter want to do?
That's a good question. She doesn't know. She doesn't really know yet.
Okay, so the fallback position. I mean, if she was, let's say, a prodigy with horses, then she would be competing with horses, and she'd do a equestrian, whatever it was, right? And you would say that makes sense.
Right.
But when you don't have this super passionate interest by the time you're ready for school, which I didn't have, then your fallback position is always money, because without being able to earn money doing something, then there's this fear involved. So it worked out for me because I ended up just having to get these classes that I was interested in along with business. So I had film classes and things to do, and English classes and literature classes that I never would have discovered otherwise anyway. So it all worked out. And what I'm saying is this is all going to work out anyway. But it's interesting that if a child had a super specific passion in high school, then whatever they chose to do to follow that passion would be considered acceptable. But if they don't have it, then money is the idea. Oh, you should go and, be in business or do something or be a teacher or be a nurse or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's so important that children have to be allowed to explore their interests at a young age without us as parents or uncle in my case, or teachers or anyone of influence saying that is a good interest that you're involved in, or that is a bad interest that you're involved in, or why don't you look at this interest that I like,
Right.
So and so it's going to be very hard for people to change the way they're doing, but if they can just keep in the back of their mind that, like, when your daughter was 2, did she seem to have interests at 2 years old?
Not really. Well, I take it back. She primarily liked, she liked to color a lot. And to this day, she relaxes by doing these incredible pictures and paintings and other sorts of things. And it's really a side, as she puts it, she doesn't want to really study it seriously, but it's something she always wants to do.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I say this with a lot of my nieces and nephews, and one of my best friends now, Bruce's son Grayson, is 4 years old. Bruce is our age, by the way, and they just had a child 4 years ago. And
God
the
bless.
way that they're interacting is unbelievable. They're just, I mean, they spend literally every waking minute together. Um, and the child from 1 year old was fascinated by trucks, anything to do with machinery, which is, and watching things on YouTube and playing with trucks and going to construction sites and watching trucks and sitting on tractors and all kinds of stuff. That's what he's fascinated with. And I think that a lot of kids are like that from a young age, that there's just certain things that they're fascinated with, but they lose that interest quickly because one interest is supposed to lead you to another interest, to another interest, to another interest, and you're supposed to be led step by step by step along this path that will eventually lead you to a passion, which will be that thing that you're here to explore. Another thing that I was rereading this again that I just got for the first time ever was that intelligence is dictated primarily by the specific things you're here to explore in this reality. So I had written down that if you come here to explore being an artist compared to being a scientist, you'll have a different faucet or tap that you turn intelligence on with. What you're interested in, if you're here to explore art, you're going to be in school and you're going to be, wanting to explore art, but that's not really going to be what they're teaching you. But if you're here to explore science, you're going to be loving everything they teach you. You're going to be more interested in learning just for the sake that you are here to explore science, and you'll need that passion for learning. Whereas art or music, you might not have the passion for academia, and the access to intelligence is a little bit different for those two people, and perceived by teachers as completely different, like one's smart and one's not smart, that sort of thing.
So won't it be wonderful when you have a classroom where you have a group of kids and the teacher's goal is to find the genius within each one of their children that they have? Because it's there. You just have to find out what their interest is.
Right. But the thing is that, you have to allow the kids to find their interest.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Joshua describes almost the room. It'd be like a room built for play.
Right.
That would have a bunch of different like corners that they could, and the student could just walk over there, and he says through play is where they would discover their passion and their interest.
So when this was written, it was really interesting because I thought it was unusual, and I wondered if a school could ever exist like this. And then I was listening to Abraham, and Abraham was talking about the Sudbury Valley School that Esther and Jerry went to visit. And this is a school in Connecticut. There's 50 of them now, but it was started in 1968. And if you look on this online, it's really interesting. You can watch YouTube videos and stuff.
What's it called again?
Sudbury, Sudbury, Valley School.
Okay.
Valley.
Yeah, and it's in Connecticut, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, Framingham, Massachusetts is where it is.
Okay.
So how it works is that there's no curriculum, there are no teachers, and it's a democratic system where each student has an equal vote, regardless of age or anything, and the representatives of the staff have a vote. So imagine a school where there's 50 kids, they have 50 votes, and the staff has one vote. So it's completely democratic. The kids can vote in or out any staff member they want. The staff members are not teachers, they're facilitators. So if the kids need help with anything, they're there to help them. But they don't teach them anything. They're just facilitate their learning in whatever way. And they're not allowed to ramp up their interest in anything or discourage them for anything. And there's no segregation of children by age, which is really important, Joshua says, because that's how villages were for hundreds and hundreds of centuries, that the age was not a separate thing. But in our society, age is separate based on the school system of going from grade 1 to grade 12. And you separate all the kids by age and expect them to learn the same thing, Well, in this school, everyone works together. So older kids help the younger kids, and younger kids aren't fearful of the older kids, and they look up to them and that sort of thing. So it's really amazing, and there's some great videos to watch. And apparently, it's incredibly successful.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting. There was I was driving the other night to pick up some hot wedges from the Italian restaurant for the family. Yes,
Hold on. What's a hot wedge?
like a hero.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a
Okay.
hero or a sub or whatever. There are different
Yeah.
names depending upon what part of the country you're in.
Okay.
It's the hoagie, wherever you are. Yeah, so I was picking up 4 chicken parm wedges because no one wanted anything that we were going to eat that we had in the house.
Uh-huh.
And on the way, I was listening to NPR radio, and it was a section called "The Moth," and it was essays. People reciting essays that they had written in front of a public audience. And one of the people there was a guy. He was in school. He was remembering his very early years, and where they segregated the kids based upon where they were perceived to be in terms of their schoolwork, and they did it by stars, moons. What was it? Stars, rockets, and moons, with moons being the worst one. And he was in that, and he was talking about this incident where he had almost, where they were looking at where he hadn't done some stupid project with leaves, and he had to run out. He realized afterwards he hadn't done it, and he went to the bathroom and then sneaked out of the school to do it, and they were looking for an excuse to put him in special ed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And his whole experience was miserable. Those first couple of years. Fast forward. He got through. They didn't wind up sticking him in the special ed program. He wound up with a PhD in economics or mathematics from Harvard. So, because he found what he was interested in.
Right. Yeah, and thank God, that you can find what you're interested in.
Right.
But yeah, that's interesting. So in this school, I was reading this. Read about this a couple years ago, so I'm just going by memory now. But I think the founder, when they put the school together, his first son, they put through it, and he learned to read quickly, and there were no issues at all, and it was a wonderful success that he found his interests and he pursued those interests, and when they like a lot of kids will go in there and they'll just come from a traditional school and they'll say, well, you can do anything you want, which they have real difficulty with that because there've never been, in our school system, it's almost like prison where you're told to do what to do every minute of the day. Well, here you have to figure out what to do on your own. So they spend time at first playing video games, but eventually they'll find something else. And so that they may spend a year just doing nothing but playing video games, but then they just naturally find something else. Now, the problem is that the parents think they're not doing anything for this whole first year and get super scared, but it works out.
And they're no doubt paying money for this school.
And they're paying money for the school too, right?
Right.
And they have friends and family who think this is crazy. But the founder, I believe it's him, his second child went, and all he did for 4 years was go fishing every day. There's a little fishing hole behind the school. And didn't learn how to read, didn't learn how to do any math, didn't learn anything. And now even him and his wife are freaking out. And then gradually he learned to read in like a matter of months. Well, most kids take many years to do it. And it was just sort of just fascinating to watch it. So the problem that they have is that they have to manage the fears of everyone else except for the kids themselves. The kids themselves, blossom and flourish at the end, but it takes them a while to get there compared to how we do it now. I think.
Right.
Go ahead.
I'm going through that now. I mean, my wife and I both graduate from college, and that's the classic: go to school, go to college, get a good job, everything. But I'm definitely on board with the new model. So I'm saying they're both graduated right now, and they're both kind of dabbling with community college, just kind of dipping their toe in to see what they want. But they have friends that are almost. My son almost has friends that are almost graduated, and we deal with the parents like, oh, what do you, if they're not going to college, they better be going to have a job. Is the other thing, and I'm like, no, I don't want them to have a job because I got a job, and I felt like I imprinted on that at a young age. You work an hour, you get paid an hour, and I really don't like that model because I'm still doing it so many years later. So I call it the grand experiment. It's like, I want to support them and say, what are your interests? What sounds exciting to do today? And, you get a lot of video game play out of my son, and I'm like, well, okay. On the positive side, there's this new esports thing, and I read that, a team of video game players was just purchased for $1 million.
Yeah, this is the next big thing.
Yeah, and it's like,
it's a huge thing.
What is it? How does that work?
So
esports.
People are playing these video games, and there's this ability to watch them play online, and so
oh my God,
with commentators,
with professional commentators, and so they also do it in arenas too. But but anyone can watch it online whenever they do it. Or you can watch recorded of it too. So this viewership for these things is going through the roof, and the kids who are going to be good at this are going to be idolized.
Yeah, it's
just starting now.
It's international.
Oh my God.
It's international, and it is a new big thing that has not existed prior to this. So
right, yeah, and so we're taking our old approach to life, which is get a job, raise a family, do all those things, and even us, we're sort of out of that already, but our parents more so. We can see that money can come from anywhere, and having a job and doing what you don't like is not necessarily the way to attract it.
That's for sure.
I tell you, I don't have a leg. There's certain friends that I have that are very traditional, and I know they're just looking at me like I'm just screwing up as a father.
Right.
Because I should be, giving them life skills now that.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting balance for myself, I think.
So I'm going to compare my friend Bruce with his son to you. So Bruce is your age. He's 52 now. And how old are you now, Steve?
52.
52, okay. So, and their child is completely raised differently than anyone else you've ever seen. Completely different in food, in education, in socialization, all this stuff.
In what way?
Okay, so they have no intention of ever having him go to a school. But he's socialized very well with the neighbor kids and with these other things they do. He's started it off with not eating food at all. He would just milk and then really little weird things that they feed him because he won't eat anything. He won't eat. His diet is totally limited. But they're fine with this, but they're also super organic people. It's just really interesting to see how this whole dynamic works. But the parents and all the people around are like, oh my God, there's problems, and the way that they treat the child is completely different than most people do it. So, but Bruce is like, I could care less what anyone else thinks, and he'll be the first one to say, this is our child, this is what we're doing, and I don't care if you think it's right or wrong. Doesn't matter a thing to me. He's the type of person that could care less what anyone thinks of him at all. He's on the complete other spectrum than me, even as far as caring what people think, which is so you can sort of see how this child picked this father, and this trajectory that they made together, because this child would be coerced into eating food, would be taken to doctors to see what's wrong with them, would be, meant to behave differently, even though he's this amazingly wonderful kid. Is just a lot different than what you normally see. And so these two people picked each other, which is really amazing. And so you can see that your children picked you too.
Yeah, and I can see it from this perspective, being that my son doesn't care how much I care what other people think. He's not changing the way he's going to be. Nobody could convince him to change the way he's going to be. He was very, he's not evil about it, but he just knows what he wants, and that's what he's doing. It's like
Right.
there's no two ways about it. And I mentioned before, we had that battle of wills, I think, when he was 8 or 9, and I gave up
Yeah,
just,
that's great.
just because I wanted to continue to love on my son, and
Yeah.
it's been the greatest thing I ever did was that.
Right. Guys, I'll be back. There's something just came up here. I'll be back in just a moment. I'm going to put on mute for a moment. Okay.
Okay, great. um, okay, so the next part of this was talking about punishment. And so they started that next section talking about, 100 years or a couple hundred years ago, it was society deemed it acceptable to own humans and punish those humans into servitude. And 100 years ago, it was acceptable to, pretty much have your wife as your slave.
Yeah, beat your wife if she doesn't
Beat your
listen to
wife,
you.
not let her vote or drive. And in my day, it was acceptable when we went to school in South Africa, and probably a lot of schools in America at the time, that they would beat you with a cane in South Africa if you did something wrong.
Yeah, I saw some of that as I was growing up.
And and that's really not as bad as the parents beating you physically. And Josh was even talking about punishment in general, but certainly not. The idea of beating children will be completely gone within the next few years.
Yeah, be barbaric.
It's barbaric, right? But what it does is that you can see that the overall feeling of unworthiness, comes from this manipulation of parents of their children, of trying to get them to do what they think is right, and if they don't behave, they're going to coerce them into behaving through punishments.
Yeah, it was interesting how he brings up, think of the perspective of the child, very close to source, knows that he's the center of his universe, can have whatever he wants and all that, and then these parents that are loving and taking care of you then beat you out of that, essentially.
Yeah.
And that made it more dramatic for me to think, wow, you're in that fantastic spot to start with. And
yeah, and then the people that you...
Okay, I'm back in.
Oh, good. Okay, great. So we're just talking about punishment and how it's, going to be seen as completely barbaric in the next few years. I mean, it's already seen that way with younger parents now. And as we get even further along, I think parents are going to realize that their job is not to take over the inner guidance system of the children. So that was a very interesting part of that one.
Yeah, I mean, we never really punished our kids to start with, and they've turned out, the way they should be.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the punishment is, certainly in my parents' case, was they didn't want to be embarrassed by us. It wasn't that much that they cared whether we were doing anything right or wrong. It's mostly when we did something in front of them or embarrassed them somehow. And then they also had this fear of us not being socialized. I remember. Go ahead.
Joshua goes in to say if the parents, he talks about that embarrassing thing and how you want your children to be socialized to some extent. But he said it's better if you let the kids go out and go ahead and incur a few embarrassing moments and let the group kind of bring the kids in to line instead of you, the parent, doing it. Because he says they have a better chance of maintaining their worthiness that way.
Right. Yeah, so if society does it, it's a different level altogether than if the parent does it. The parent has so much influence over the child. Michael, last week we were talking about your son who you wanted to do homework because you didn't want him to fail and be left behind ninth grade. And in reality, though, that the society, he would never do that anyway. He would figure out a way to get through ninth grade without having to do his homework. It's a interesting thing that you have this worry that something's going to happen, but like you had a worry, that you might become homeless. Well, that could never happen to you. It's just not in your vibration at all. You are on this trajectory, and then that aspect of physical existence is just not what you're here to explore. But you see other people exploring it, and you think that if it's happening to them, it could happen to me. But you're on a
Right. Well,
completely
well,
different
I've
level.
always been taught, "But for the grace of God, go I." So
Yeah, and it's not really the grace of God. It's just that you're not interested in exploring that, and maybe you had it some other incarnation, but this one you're not. That's not going to happen for you. And just like your son is going to be a success. Um, and I think you can see a lot of these things in the trajectory that the child chooses by choosing you and where they're born and the time and date of their birth. I'm thinking more about that lately too. Is that I think that you can I think there's a way to figure out what someone's passion or what someone's interest is or what they're here to explore by looking at their trajectory of what they chose when they first came in here. Why did they choose their parents? Why did they choose where they were born? How did that create desire that would lead them to what they're here to explore? Okay,
yeah,
so
it's all very interesting. I also find that one experience does feed on the other, which gets to that very basic point that we we chose the begin, or at least certain of the elements when we came to where we got where we are, and then we start attracting what is for us, what's our interests, what's our passions.
I know that we have free will, and we can choose everything. But I'm having this idea that things are going along a pretty narrow path, that we come to a place in life pretty close to what we intended. Do you guys feel like that yet, or do you think it's completely random?
No, I don't think it's completely. I don't think it's completely random, but I don't think I'm quite. I think I'm more like thinking I'm on a narrow ledge, and if I don't make the right step, I might just plummet to my death. No, that's
right.
I'm being a little negative there, but
no, but I think that that's how people view it. I think that it seems like it's so hard to stay on our path, but what I'm sort of getting now is that we are really, really close to what we intended prior to coming here. The way things are unfolding. Yeah, so I'm beginning to see this in a different light now.
Yeah, Joshua answered one of my questions, and he referred to the fact that I wouldn't. You were talking about being homeless. Like I wouldn't experience that because that's not something I would allow. And I thought that was interesting that he was saying I would not allow it.
Right.
Because I forget that I'm creating it all. Even like you think you create a certain amount of abundance, but it's like you're creating exactly the amount of abundance that you're experiencing. You're creating a abundance of lack at the same time you're creating abundance of. It's just a balance that you are creating, and I never looked at it that way. I always looked at it like, I was always striving for more, but I couldn't quite attain, the more. And it's like, no, that's just where you're creating right now.
And it's also your perception of it too. Yeah,
exactly.
Of course.
Yeah. So we need to be cognizant of our perception, and then start looking at things from the higher perspective. Yeah. So if you take a look at our lives and you compare them to, anyone who's more successful, we were perceiving ourselves as less successful. But if you perceive them to the 7 billion people who are, struggling compared to us, it's probably more than 7 billion. I don't know. We're probably the top 1% of 1% of 1%. Anyone who's living in America is probably especially if you can go back over the eons of human history. And if you take your perspective from that point, rather than of the couple of people that are doing better,
right.
But we're so focused on the people who are doing better.
Right.
It's crazy.
I mean, look, you go back 500 years, and what was luxury back then? Luxury was being in a drafty castle without running water, where if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you had to schlep out to an outhouse or a pot
in your room.
In your room. Yeah, people bathed every once or seasonally,
right?
Potentially because of the weather. Yeah, people had, routinely had lice. People routinely, their teeth would fall out when they were in their 30s because there was no such thing as brushing teeth.
Yeah.
And if someone lived to their 50s, that was considered a ripe old age.
Well, just look at 50 years ago. I always think about this. Wouldn't it be fun to take a vacation as you are now back in time? So let's say we go back to the 60s and okay, everyone's smoking in the elevators and planes and cars.
That's right. I remember it.
Everyone is a racist, basically. Everyone is. You have no technology. You're watching, the things that people are interested in. It's completely different. You wouldn't want to go back there. Yeah, everyone's drinking it at lunch.
Right.
What's wrong with that?
I don't know. All right.
The proverbial 3-martini lunch.
3-martini lunch, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. Like Mad Men, I love that show. But if you're really in that, it wouldn't be so fun. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Let's go on to our question of the week from Elena. Who wants to read the question? Who wants to read Joshua's answer?
I'm flexible.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead. Whichever one.
Why don't Steve, you read the question?
Okay, here goes. Dear Joshua, my grandson has Asperger's syndrome that limits daily food intakes to a very minimum. He also refuses to take vitamin supplements, and that has already led to some concerns. He's a very smart and loving boy and has a strong attachment to his mother. Why does such a syndrome occur? Is there a higher meaning to it? And most importantly, how do I help my grandson overcome it? Respectfully, Elena.
This is an interesting question. She says, why does this syndrome occur? Which is interesting that she's saying that there's a reason for it. Is there a higher meaning to it? She's looking for the higher meaning. And most importantly, how do I get over it? So it's sort of like saying,
posed in the guise of how do I help my grandson?
Yeah, how to help her? But the thing is that she's not realizing. Well, we'll go into the answer and see what Joshua says.
Right.
Okay.
Dear Elena, every experience of life is unique. If you can accept our simple premise that the purpose of life is to expand through experience, then you can see that you can see that all life, all experience, and all expansion is beneficial. So let us further explain our premise. You chose to come here to physical reality so that you could experience things firsthand and expand your consciousness through those firsthand experiences. From the non-physical realm, you can witness anything and everything you like, but it's like watching a movie. Physical reality is always happening to someone else. They are having the experiences and expanding while you are observing. Real growth occurs through experience. You decided to come here to this playground called Earth to experience physical reality for yourself and grow through that experience. You've done this many times. Your grandson has as well. If you can look at your experience of life, you can see that socialization has limited your experience. There were many things you might have liked to explore, but due to societal restrictions, you were either not allowed to, or you limited yourself by considering such things as inappropriate. Your grandson has no such limitations.
Okay, so first of all, well, keep going. Let's go more and see where we lead from here.
Okay. Before coming to physical reality, you set certain intentions. Most of your intentions were general in nature. You intended to have fun, experience joy, love, companionship, laughter, etc. You also had one or more things you wanted to explore in greater detail. These are your interests and passions. Many, many people never discover their true passion in life because their parents, family, peers, or society deems these passions and interests to be out of the norm, and so the person makes do without developing those passions. This will never be the case for your grandson. Your grandson chose this specific experience you call Asperger's specifically because it would be highly unlikely that anyone could sway him away from whatever interests him. In fact, due to the unique nature of this condition specifically, he is more inclined to become attached to certain interests for longer periods of time, and his interest will be more intense. This condition you see as a problem is precisely the vehicle that will allow him to focus his energies without the distraction of societal bias. He will not care what others think. You believe that this is an unsocial behavioral condition, but to him and us, it is unnatural for others to have judgment and influence over whatever one chooses to explore. He will not care what others think, and this causes those around him to label that trait antisocial.
So all we've talked about today is how society, your parents, teachers, influence you away from interests because you, as a child, care what they think. In this case, he is free to explore whatever he wants to explore without caring what people think. And he gets to use this label of Asperger's or this condition more fully to explore what he wants to explore. So we know that he chose this coming in, and he chose it specifically the Asperger's thing. I mean, you could have been anything. You could have been autistic or a lot of different things, right? And he chose it specifically because this would allow him to explore what he's here to explore. And as a grandmother, it's hard to see that.
You know, the timing on this is interesting. Yesterday for Christmas, I just found out that one of my nephews, his mom thinks he has Asperger's. And, you know, I don't get to, they live in another state, so we don't see each other a whole lot, and I don't interact a lot. But in my short interaction with them yesterday, like we sat down to play a game of Scrabble or something like that, and he goes, no, I don't do word games or something like that. And he didn't say it in a way like he wasn't interested in doing it. He said it in a way that I'm not good at that stuff, and so I'm not. And it was kind of the sense impression I got was that his mom is telling him that you have this learning disability essentially, and that you're not amazing. I mean, I wanted to grab him and go, you know, kind of let him know that he was amazing and that he just needs to find his amazingness, you know, wherever it is,
right?
You know, but you know, his parents are very religious and they think we're freaks. So
well, remember he chose the parents, so
yeah. So
that's all part
I
of it
know
too.
he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. I just kind of piggybacking off the judgment aspect of it because Josh was saying here that that's really not a necessary part of the whole equation. You can have Asperger's, but it could be like, hey, that's great that you have that.
Well, that's sort of how we have to say that it's not a condition to be solved, that it's a condition that was chosen.
Yes, deliberately.
Right. And if the child chooses it, deems it unnecessary, then the condition will be unnecessary. Same thing with autism and a lot of these things.
Right. Well,
we actually people who are involved in it to see this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we actually, you know, I've done some special education work in my practice, and some of the best schools are the ones, you know, that steer away from what's called the behavioral model, you know, which is kind of like almost like a Pavlov's dog approach to dealing with the children, and instead deal with, you know, their particular needs, their particular desires, where they are in the world, and give them a lot more freedom. Absolutely.
And so when you take away that it's wrong, the condition's wrong, or their behavior's wrong, or anything's wrong with this, and you go to understand that they've chosen this specifically to explore an aspect of reality, and then now all you're trying to do is empower them to do what they came here to do, then that's really powerful, I think.
Right.
It'll be incredible when this comes through, you know. Remember last week I was talking about the kid who had autism, and then he did the TED Talk, and he became astrophysicist or whatever. So I watched that TED Talk again last week, and he said that when he was a little kid, he was completely focused on this on reality, like the little shadows and how the shadows bounced off of here and here. And he was just totally absorbed with it and was really interested in what was going around on him. But to his mother and parents, it looked like he was just staring at a blank wall and not moving. And he said, but to him, there was a lot of stuff going on. It was just incredible. And then as he was able to develop his interests further without this, being forced to be different than he was, he worked his way into exploring, more and more stuff. And then his desire caused him to want to go to college. Well, obviously, it was interesting. He had to finish high school before he could go to college. And he was, I think, 11 or something. So he finished high school in 3 months and then was able to go to this college. And it was like a tough thing to get into the college at 11 or whatever, however old he was. Really interesting stuff.
I was amazed at his level of focus. I mean, he takes it to a whole nother level where, like he said, from the outside, it looks like there's nothing going on. And he can spend like a year contemplating a problem.
Yeah.
Right. With the focus that would be the envy of a lot of us.
Yeah, he quickly went on to math that I was not able to comprehend there.
Well, when he was talking about how he saw math as this axis and that they showed this diagram of what he was seeing, and these at the end of the axis were these lines that rotated around, and that was division up or down, and it was very interesting how we just saw everything differently, and it just shows you that mind is working at a whole different level than we are.
Right. Yeah, we're only just beginning to scratch the surface on how the brain actually works. So.
Yeah. Okay. Next paragraph.
Okay. Asperger's, autism, and other developmental conditions have been chosen by those who wish to experience more specific aspects of physical reality without the interference of others. They, unlike most humans, do not wish to conform. They wish to experience their uniqueness and expand in the way they intend to prior to being born into this environment. You cannot change them, and they do not wish to be cured unless you have instilled in them the belief that their condition is wrong. If you do not consider their condition to be wrong, they will feel proud that they are unique, and they will develop in ways that you could not imagine. Your view of them as having an undesirable condition and wanting them to be normal simply makes them focus more on the negative aspects of the condition. If left alone, they would not think that they were different in a bad way. They would wish to be more like them. There is no. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So here they chose this condition so they could explore reality in a unique way without the influence of others, and as long as society and the parents and people around them don't instill the belief that the condition is bad, that they can grow from where they are, or they can work within this condition in reality perfectly well. So there you go. I mean, and you see a lot of this is people trying to get rid of these conditions or cure these conditions or eradicate these conditions from ever happening again. But they just aren't understanding the benefit of it.
Well, there's also, I think, fear, Gary, that either the people with these various developmental conditions won't be able to take care of themselves, or alternatively, that they can physically hurt themselves or others. And some children with autism and some children with these developmental disabilities that are on the autistic spectrum, do get physically violent. They do bang their heads in frustration. They do certain things. So in fairness, at least to the parents, the concern is not as much conformity as that very basic fear that Joshua, in fact, even talks about in other writings, where he talks about the fear that parents have about trying to protect the child physically.
Right.
But that's an irrational fear.
It's an irrational fear. So you see that the fear is causing the resistance, and the resistance manifests itself in this physical outburst. Had there been total unconditional acceptance of the condition, then there would be no resistance, or there'd be less resistance. And so you can see that it's that if left uninfluenced and natural to develop the way that the child intended to develop by having this, that these issues of physical violence or whatever would not manifest. But it's the fear around it that causes, the reason the child is having an outburst, whether they have autism or a normal kid, is because they're being told to conform to some set of standards that the parent arbitrarily imposes on them. I would say that if you showed me parents who were completely accepting of this condition, that the child would be different.
Yeah,
and that's just my idea.
Beating his head against the wall, probably.
Right. Wouldn't what, Steve?
Wouldn't be beating his head against the wall.
Right. I think that the behavior of beating a head against the wall is just a more obvious outburst, than we all have. I mean, I've beaten my head against the wall as a kid too, and actually, as a teenager, gotten very mad at my father, where we almost had a fight. So because he was trying to, mold me into this version of me that wasn't me. So I don't know. Maybe it's obviously simple for us who aren't knee deep in this to spout off, our ideology. But we're taking this from what seems to be basic laws of the universe that we're all learning about now. And I think that if we pay more attention to these laws, that we can see it from a different perspective, and it'll help just a bit. And as we go forward, I think that people will get better and better at this sort of thing. But absolutely, Michael, you're bringing up a point that I'm glad you shared, because if you're you even have firsthand experience with this, where I certainly don't have anything like what you have. But I think that if we look at it from
it's secondhand. I'm dealing with it through my clients.
Yeah, so you know what they say and all that stuff too.
Right.
Okay, let's go on the last paragraph.
You got it. There is no wrong anywhere in the universe, and this condition is not wrong either. It may seem unusual to you, but if you can understand that they chose the condition for the benefit it brings to their ability to follow specific interests just as they have intended, then you can be happy for them and feel at ease, for you know that this condition is for their and your higher good. You are loved more than you can imagine. Joshua.
Yeah. So when when Joshua answers people's questions and I send it to them, in 80% of the time, the people will write back, "Thank you so much. This is really helpful. I'm going to read it more often. I understand more about it now. I have a different perspective." In this case, this woman did not write back, so I don't know what she thought of her answer.
She might have thought you were confused.
Yeah, she may have. I mean, but she was enlightened enough to somehow find Joshua and ask the question, and yet, she is there firsthand going, "My life would be better, or my daughter's life or son's life, who was ever the child, would be better if their kid did not have this syndrome." And that's an easy thing to think,
They signed up for it, though.
They sign up for it, exactly right. And if you can embrace that you signed up for this, that you are ready to handle it, that is, and not care what other people think about it, it'll make things so much easier.
Okay, 58.
Okay, well, this was a great.
We know
great
really
show.
So, Steve.
If anyone out there has a question, please visit theteachingsofjoshua.com and do not hesitate to ask. It's always helpful, not just to you, but to all of us. We love hearing your questions, and Joshua loves answering them, and it's the most fun thing that we do. There's our timer right there. So everyone have a fantastic week, and we will see you next year, right?
Yes, next year.
Okay.
Right.
So everyone have a happy new year, and we're going to talk about the new year next year.
Awesome.
Talk to you then. Okay, bye guys.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Thanks for listening to the Teachings of Joshua Roundtable with Gary Temple Bodley. We will be back next week with another fun discussion. If you would like to ask Joshua a question, or read more of Joshua's teachings, please visit us at theteachingsofjoshua.com. See you next week.
The incredible, magnificent Law of Attraction Cruise of a Lifetime is taking place on March 6th through 10th, 2016, featuring New York Times best-selling Law of Attraction author Pam Grout, and featuring Michael Perlman, MD, of Law of Attraction Journaling, and best-selling and award-winning wealth author Richard Harper, along with our own beautiful and dynamic speaker, Constance Arnold, will be on board as well. Don't forget Gary Temple Bodley, who channels Joshua, will be on board, and you will be able to have direct interactions with Joshua. And then there's the Champagne Living Dream Coach, Cassie Parks, as well as me, Jules Johnson. This is a powerful cruise, and it's happening during the week of the total solar eclipse in Pisces, which is ruler of the water, which means that which you shine a light on will shift almost effortlessly. So what are you waiting for? This is your chance to finally change your life in profound ways. Go to LOARadionetwork.com and sign up today. There's still cabins available, but the rates will increase weekly. Need a cabin mate? No worries. We have like-minded individuals for you to room with. Take this time and invest in yourself. You will be so happy you did. Go to LOARadionetwork.com. See you on board.